When a seven-time world champion walks into a press conference and tells everyone he's not thinking about winning the championship, there are only two possibilities. Either he's being completely honest, or he's playing the most calculated psychological game in Formula One right now. And after watching what's unfolded in the past few weeks, I'm convinced it's something far more complicated than either option. Lewis Hamilton just delivered a message to his Formula One rivals ahead of the Belgian Grand Prix that on the surface sounds humble and focused, but if you actually dig into what's happening behind the scenes at Ferrari, it's the most dangerous thing he could possibly be saying right now. Because while everyone's analyzing whether he's sincere about ignoring the championship, something massive is actually shifting in the competition, and it's the kind of momentum that changes titles. Let me take you through exactly what's happening at Ferrari, why Hamilton's words matter so much more than people think, and then we're going to jump into the absolutely chaotic situation unfolding with Lando Norris that's reshaping the entire championship battle heading into Belgium. So here's the context you need to understand first. We're 9 races into the 2026 Formula One season. Hamilton joined Ferrari this year, and it's been nothing short of remarkable. 5 podium finishes in 9 races. A stunning victory at Barcelona that showed Ferrari can beat anyone when everything clicks. And most importantly, he's sitting third in the championship standings, just 32 points behind championship leader Kimi Antonelli. That's close. That's not just competitive, that's genuinely threatening. But here's where it gets interesting. When Hamilton was asked directly about the title fight, he said something that caught everyone's attention. He told reporters, and I'm quoting him here, "I'm not thinking about the championship. I'm thinking about each race and executing it in a way like we did in Barcelona." And then he explained that the pit stops, the strategy, getting everything in sync, that's what actually matters. Not points, not standings, execution. Now, on face value, that sounds like standard sports psychology, the one race at a time mentality that every elite athlete talks about. But here's the thing that makes this genuinely clever and potentially dangerous for his rivals. He's essentially saying that Ferrari isn't distracted by the pressure of championship calculations. They're just executing flawlessly weekend after weekend. And statistically, if you execute better than everyone else on the grid consistently, the championship just shows up on its own. Think about it that way. It's almost like he's reframing the entire battle. Instead of "we're trying to win the championship," he's saying "we're trying to be perfect at our job," which is honestly a much harder thing for a rival to combat. It's the difference between fighting someone who's looking at the finish line versus someone who's just focused on the next step in front of them. The Barcelona victory is the perfect example of what he's talking about. That wasn't luck. That wasn't one moment of brilliance. That was strategy, pit stops perfectly executed, racing execution on track, tire management, everything synchronized. And that's exactly the kind of race Hamilton believes Ferrari needs to repeat every single weekend for the rest of the season. But there's more happening at Ferrari that makes this statement even more intriguing. The team has been working incredibly hard on engine development. They've taken what they had at the beginning of the season and found a step forward. It's not a massive leap, but it's consistent improvement. And in Formula One, consistent improvement while you're already winning races, that's how championships are built. Charles Leclerc, Hamilton's teammate, actually warned before Belgium that Mercedes is still the team to beat at Spa, and that's a telling admission because it shows Ferrari isn't overconfident, but it also shows they have the momentum. They've won 2 of the last 3 races. They've significantly closed the gap to Mercedes, which absolutely dominated the opening phase of the season. That's the trajectory of a championship-winning team. So when Hamilton says he's not thinking about the championship, what he's really saying is that Ferrari has found the rhythm and they're going to ride that rhythm all the way through the rest of the season. It's confidence disguised as focus. But here's where everything gets complicated, because at the exact moment Hamilton is talking about execution and consistency, something absolutely massive just happened to one of his biggest title rivals. And this is where the real chaos begins. Lando Norris, the reigning world champion from McLaren, has just been handed a 10-place grid penalty heading into the Belgian Grand Prix. And here's why this matters so much more than just a simple penalty for using too many parts. McLaren strategically timed this penalty, and the reasoning behind it reveals exactly how tight this championship battle has become. So let's understand what actually happened. McLaren needed to install a fourth power electronics unit on Norris's car because they've had an absolute nightmare season with reliability issues. His first power electronics unit suffered a terminal failure during the Chinese Grand Prix weekend. Then, in Japan, they brought in a replacement that also had significant issues. They tried to repair it, but it failed again during Monaco. By that point, McLaren was out of options. They had to install another unit, which automatically triggered a 10-place grid penalty because you're only allowed 3 per season under Formula One regulations. Now, here's where this becomes strategic brilliance or desperation, depending on how you want to look at it. McLaren deliberately chose the Belgian Grand Prix as the venue to take this penalty. And that's not random. Spa-Francorchamps is widely considered one of the best overtaking circuits on the entire Formula One calendar. Long straights, multiple passing opportunities, fast corners that reward bravery and precision. It's the kind of track where a good driver can recover positions even if they start from a disadvantage. The alternative would have been to take the penalty at the
Hungary or Zandvoort, which are coming up next. But at both of those tracks, overtaking is significantly harder. The circuits are more narrow, more technical, and more defensive. So from a pure strategic standpoint, McLaren looked at the calendar, understood they had to take the penalty sometime, and said Spa is our best opportunity to minimize the damage. That's actually pretty smart decision-making, even though it sucks for Norris. But here's what makes this situation even more significant. The penalty stems from reliability issues that have basically plagued McLaren all season. And those reliability issues didn't come out of nowhere. Mercedes' high-performance powertrains, who supplies McLaren's engines, has been having problems. They've introduced new reliability upgrades to fix things, but it took them a while to get there. McLaren is basically gambling right now. They're accepting a penalty at Spa because they believe the new power electronics unit from Mercedes will prevent catastrophic failures in the races that matter most down the line. They're sacrificing track position this weekend to protect themselves from potential problems later. And when you're already trailing both Mercedes and Ferrari in the championship, that's a massive gamble. Because what if the new parts still have issues? What if Norris can't recover the positions at Spa like they're hoping? What if the reliability problems continue anyway? But Norris has been surprisingly upbeat about the whole situation. The reigning world champion acknowledged that the penalty creates a challenge, but he's been talking about Spa's layout giving him opportunities to fight back through the field. And look, he's not wrong. If anyone can extract the maximum from an overtaking circuit, it's a talent like Norris. But there's a difference between confidence and realistic expectations. A 10-place grid penalty at any track is a massive handicap. Here's what makes this timing so significant for the championship picture. Norris has already had a difficult first half of the season. Reliability setbacks have been a constant problem, so he's already trailing the leaders by a substantial margin. Now he's facing a situation where he's lost track position through no real fault of his own. It's a technical issue that he couldn't control. And that's the difference between winning and losing championships sometimes. It's not just about talent or consistency, it's about the little things going right more often than they go wrong. Meanwhile, Mercedes is under pressure. They dominated the opening phase of the season, but Ferrari has caught them. Hamilton and his teammates are delivering results. Leclerc has been impressive. And now, coming into Belgium, you've got this interesting dynamic where Ferrari feels like they're building momentum, Mercedes knows they have to respond, and McLaren is essentially saying, we're going to sacrifice this weekend to protect our future. The contrast between Ferrari and McLaren right now is absolutely stark. Ferrari enters Belgium with growing confidence, fresh off multiple strong results, encouraged by engine upgrades that are actually delivering benefits. They're not desperate, they're not struggling, they're improving. McLaren is in damage control mode, trying to navigate a season that's gone sideways with reliability issues, and now they're having to make these brutal strategic decisions just to stay competitive down the line. And that's where Hamilton's comments become even more interesting, because while Norris is fighting just to keep his championship hopes alive, Hamilton is sitting in a Ferrari that's actually on an upward trajectory. He can genuinely afford to only think about execution because Ferrari's execution has been good. He doesn't need to worry about whether the car will last until the end of the race, because reliability has been solid.
He doesn't need to wonder if an engine penalty is coming next week because Ferrari's been smart about managing those allocations. So when he says he's not thinking about the championship, he's operating from a position of strength. He's the one who can focus purely on performance because the foundation is solid. Norris doesn't have that luxury right now. Now let's actually dive into what this means for the Belgian Grand Prix specifically, because this weekend is setting up to be absolutely crucial for multiple reasons. Hamilton and Ferrari want to prove that Barcelona wasn't a one-off. They want to show that the engine upgrades and the team's improvement is consistent and sustainable. Leclerc wants to help Ferrari maintain this momentum and prove that even though Mercedes has strength at Spa, Ferrari can compete and potentially win. And they want to do this all while maintaining this narrative that they're not even thinking about the championship, which is hilarious because obviously they are, but they're being smarter about how they communicate it. Mercedes needs to respond. They've been pushed back into a position where they're defending rather than attacking, and that's not where they want to be. They dominated the season's opening races, but they've lost momentum. If Mercedes doesn't win at Spa, or at least put in a strong performance, the narrative starts to shift even more towards Ferrari, and that becomes a psychological thing as much as it's a performance thing. Then there's the absolute circus surrounding Norris and McLaren. Norris is trying to show that even with a 10th-place grid penalty, a world champion can still extract maximum points at a circuit that offers opportunities. If he somehow manages to finish well despite starting from a disadvantage, it sends a powerful message about his talent and McLaren's pace. But if he struggles, if the penalty actually costs him more than expected, then suddenly people start wondering about McLaren's entire season trajectory. The thing about Formula One that fascinates me is that it's rarely just about raw pace. Yes, obviously you need a good car, you need a reliable power unit, you need good strategy, but it's also about momentum, psychology, and how teams and drivers handle adversity. Ferrari right now has momentum, McLaren is fighting adversity, Mercedes is trying to regain control, and those intangible things matter just as much as lap times.
Bugging me about this entire situation, Hamilton keeps saying he's not thinking about the championship. But is that actually possible? I don't think it is. And I'm not saying he's lying. I think he's doing something smarter than that. I think he's genuinely trying to ignore it consciously, but his subconscious is obviously aware of it. And maybe that's the sweet spot. Maybe the drivers who win championships aren't the ones who completely ignore the points and standings, but the ones who acknowledge it exists and then actively choose to focus on something else. Because if you completely ignore the championship, you lose the urgency that drives you. You lose the focus that makes you push hard on qualifying days when it matters. But if you obsess over it, you lose the clarity that comes from trusting your process. Hamilton seems to have found that balance. He's close enough to the lead that he knows it's possible, but he's far enough back that he can genuinely focus on performance without the weight of being the favorite. The Ferrari team seems to understand this dynamic too. They're not putting unrealistic pressure on Hamilton to win the championship right now. They're saying, execute well, deliver at every race, and let's see where we are at the end. That's actually the smart way to manage a title fight, especially when you're coming from third place. So heading into Belgium, here's what's actually at stake. For Hamilton and Ferrari, it's about proving their recent form is real and sustainable. For Mercedes, it's about stopping the bleeding and reasserting their early season dominance. For Norris and McLaren, it's about damage control, strategic thinking, and trying to turn a setback into a long-term advantage. The Belgian Grand Prix is going to be one of the most fascinating races of the season because it's not just about who crosses the line first, it's about momentum and perception, and whether Ferrari really has turned a corner. It's about whether Mercedes can respond to pressure. It's about whether Norris can overcome adversity. It's about whether McLaren's gamble on future reliability actually pays off, or whether it cost them dearly this weekend. And it's about whether Lewis Hamilton's calm, measured, focused approach actually translates into championship points when the lights go out on Sunday at one of the most iconic circuits in all of motorsport. Because Spa is where legends are made and where championships are won and lost. Here's my genuine take on this whole situation. Whether Hamilton admits it or not, and whether he's actively thinking about it or not, he is rapidly becoming one of the most dangerous contenders in the 2026 Formula One World Championship. Not because he's talking about winning it,
not because he's publicly confident about it, but because he's doing something much smarter. He's executing at the highest level, he's building momentum, and he's doing it all while seemingly unbothered by the broader championship picture. And that's actually terrifying for his rivals. Because the drivers you really have to worry about aren't the ones who are desperate and hungry and vocal about their championship ambitions. The ones you really have to worry about are the ones who are just quiet, consistent, and executing at an elite level race after race. That's been Hamilton's entire career, and this season at Ferrari is no different. So while everyone's debating whether Hamilton is genuine or playing mind games with his not thinking about the championship comments, what's actually happening is he's out there delivering results. Ferrari's improving week by week, and suddenly 32 points behind the leader doesn't seem so far away anymore. Spa is going to be absolutely crucial. If Ferrari wins there, if Hamilton delivers another strong result, the narrative completely shifts. We're not talking about Ferrari anymore as this team that's trying to close the gap. We're talking about Ferrari as a genuine, legitimate title threat. And when you're a title threat with half the season still to go, everything changes. The pressure shifts to the teams ahead of you. Mercedes will know they have to perform. Antonelli will know he's being chased down. And suddenly, Hamilton's decision to focus on execution rather than points starts looking like the smartest strategy in the entire championship. The 2026 Formula One season is shaping up to be absolutely incredible, and we're only at the Belgian Grand Prix. The second half is going to be epic. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the coverage of every single race, because trust me, this championship battle is far from over.